Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again and welcome to episode 17. Now, Imagine Theatre is one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre, and we've already met people working on their shows all over the UK.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
I'm Martin Ballard, and don't worry if you missed any of the previous episodes because they are still available. We've had some fabulous guests so far, from directors and choreographers to lighting designers and many of the stars of Imagine Theatre shows. So make sure you subscribe to the series now because there are many, many more to come. Now, in episode 16, I was joined by a man who knows all about panto and Imagine Theatre because he was there at the very beginning of Imagine Theatre, that is, not panto. He is the writer, actor, producer and director Will Brenton. This time, it's the turn of the actor who's done literally everything from Farce to Shakespeare. He is one of the country's best dames. In fact, he was voted Best Dame by the UK Panto Fan Awards in 2016 and 17. He is Reading's favourite dame, Paul Morse. How are you, Paul?
Hello, Martin. Wow, what an intro. Thank you.
It's been a really crazy old time over the last 18 months or so, and we both had our photo shoots for Panto recently, which was just such a great joy to be back in the room with fellow performers, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was lovely to get back in, and we've been there away so long, and we didn't know if it was actually really going to happen. Everyone's just chomping at the bit. The theatre crew is just desperate for it to get up and running. So I think this year's going to be even better than normal, I think, because everyone's just going to be so excited to be back working. So
tell us about your formative years, Paul. When were you bitten by the performance bug? Was it at school?
Yeah, at school I was always in the school plays, always in a leading role, won every drama award going. I never did Amdram outside of school. I always found that a bit too embarrassing. I didn't quite have the confidence to go and do that, but at school I was always pushed to the fore in the plays and the musicals. And then it got to that point at school where you have to make that decision of what are you going to do, university or what. So I originally was going to do reptile medicine and zoology. When I told my teachers, they laughed quite heartily and said, "Oh no, I think the stage is for you, my boy." So I went off to university and I did a degree in drama and theatre studies. And then whilst I was there, I tried out for drama school and got in. So I thought it's best to get the qualification under my belt should acting not work out, and I can go down a different route with a degree. And then I went to drama school, Drama Studio London, following university.
And what about panto? When did panto first enter your life? Do you ever remember going as a kid to see a panto?
Yeah, my mum always took us to see the local pantomime. At the Beck in Hayes was a local theatre to us, and the Greenford Hall also used to do pro shows. So we'd always go and see them there and enjoyed them, but I was always very happy to sit at the back and not join in, which is just ridiculous now, playing the dame, and I practically force people to join in. So I could enjoy them, but I'm quite reserved at sometimes. So I do, and even now when I go and see friends in panto, obviously all of our friends are in the show, so when you get a chance to see them, I'm quite happy to sit back and watch people work and not join in.
Do you remember the first one you saw, and did that have an impact on you? Because many people have a preferred panto, one that they enjoy the most, and sometimes it's the one they first saw as a child.
I think the first two I can remember, one was Cinderella, and I just remember the Ugly Sisters in just looking huge, absolutely ginormous, and great big frocks. And that's when we were still bringing ponies. I don't think many people do that anymore. The ponies would come on at the end of Act 1, and that was always magical. And I saw Aladdin with Wurzel Gummidge, was it Pertwee?
John Pertwee, yeah.
John Pertwee was in it, and I loved Wurzel Gummidge. So again, in that world, to see a celebrity in real life was a magical thing. To think, I watch you on telly, and Rod Hull and Emu, it's showing me age, but seeing all those people in real life was amazing in itself, before we add in the element of pantomime magic, which is, it's just, you believe it, don't you? It's just magical.
And when you left Drama Studio London, was panto on your radar, or were you just looking for work in general?
No, it's very much on the radar. Drama Studio London, we did panto classes. They were very much of the vein of, this is a big element of work at winter time, and if you can do it, not everyone can do it, but if you can get work in pantomime, you should go for it. So we actually toured pantos to the local schools to get us into and learning the traditions and all that sort of thing. When I left DSL, my first job was in panto at the Thorndike Theatre, now the Leatherhead Theatre. I did Cinderella there. And then Paul Hammond, Feel the Magic, saw me, and we had to sing that jingle every show, and it really is just stuck in me. And then so they saw me, and I had to do a thing called Panto Idol, which was for ITV Meridian, and I just thought it was an audition. I didn't realise it was going out weekly on the television, and I won it. I turned up to what I thought was my final call, and it was in front of a live audience, live on telly, and I had to go on in front of the panel and do patter. And I won it. So yeah, it was always been my first job, and then I always worked my years backwards. I'd always start with planning my Christmas, and then the autumn tour, the summer tour, and the spring tour. So I'd always work backwards. But panto, yeah, this is my 18th or 19th consecutive year, so it's a firm fixture.
So one of the joys of doing this podcast is it reminds me of just how small a world it is, talking to people with so many mutual friends and people that you've worked with. I actually did 3 pantos for Paul Hammond back in the 1990s. Yeah, a joy. What a joy. Now, over the years, you've done, I mentioned at the very beginning, so many different things, because a lot of panto people might predominantly do comedy. You've done comedy, you've done plays like Rising Damp on tour, but you've done musical theatre, you've done Shakespeare, you've done the lot, haven't you? Yeah,
I've been really lucky. And again, that's through the training. They trained us at drama school for everything, for the comedy, for straight, for musical theatre. And really, as an actor, you just want to work. And if you can turn your hand to anything, I'm one for not being typecast, says him playing Dane for 18 years. But in other roles, do as much as you can. So, and obviously when I did do Shakespeare's, I did play Sir Andrew Aguecheek in Twelfth Night and Demetrius. So they were the comedy roles. The only straight role I played in Shakespeare was when I did Macbeth, and I played Malcolm. So I had to be very butch and no slipping over and whoops, any of that stuff, which was hard to do, But roles in Rising, when I did Rising Damp for 2 years, playing the Richard Beckinsale role, just a gift, and it's just so lovely to go on and play in trousers, not always have to think, where are my boobs and my dress today?
Having said that, you've done quite a lot of farce as well, haven't you? A Bed Full of Foreigners, but I'm a big fan of Fado, and Fado farces are very seldom performed these days, but you've done at least one of those, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, I did. The Clock Strikes 10 was a Fado farce. I just love it. I really love farce. I think it's so good, and they're not hugely done anymore. I don't know if it's the audiences aren't quite used, the younger audiences used to listening to the comedy because it is so wordy. But I like the structured element of it. My director was Granville Saxton, and he learnt from Ben Travers. So I did one called Tharp, which is a Ben Travers farce. So you'll just it feels like the timing and the rules are just being handed down from the greats before, and it's just a joy to play. And I love that you open that door and slam that door and walk there, you get the laugh, build on I love that technical side of it as well.
Yeah, one of the things that interests me, coming from Leicester as I do, and being well aware of the life and the tragic end of Joe Orton, was something that you did, which in fact you played Kenneth Halliwell, didn't you? Anybody who knows the story will know who Kenneth Halliwell was, but this was a musical, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's still, I think it's about to go on again soon. It's now called Autumn, but they call it The Boys in the Front Room. It wasn't a cheesy musical. I would really call it a play with song. And Joe Orton's family came to see it, and obviously Kenneth Halliwell, for those who don't know, murdered Joe Orton with a hammer and then committed suicide himself straight after. And I've never played a living, by that point, a real person before, and to find that empathy for him, that I know he murdered Joe Orton, but he wasn't a crazed killer. It really was a crime of passion, and even the family agreed that this was how it was going to end up. This was really they were such a fraught relationship that this could be the only way it ended. So that was fascinating to play a real person and try to play him truthfully and not just slap on, I'm going to hit you with a hammer 5 times,
There is another side to Paul Morse, which we'll talk about in a moment's time, if you don't mind, because it's a slightly different undertaking, no pun intended. But I'm interested to know when you first slipped into a frock, because you said panto was always on the radar, but were you always going to be a dame?
I didn't think I was, but people who cast me obviously saw it in me. At DSL drama school was when the first panto I was put in, and I thought I was going to be a Buttons character, and they said, "Oh no, we think we should put you in a dress." I said, "Oh, okay," and I was a bit gutted, but I did it. And then they said, "You're the best dame the school's had in 40 years. Please go and find work as a dame," and it was great. And I'd never even consider another partner. Now, I think like you will know, once you've put a frock on, it's very hard to see someone else doing it. I just don't think I would be able to do it in a panto, not play the role. It's very freeing. It's great. But I play it truthfully, not just slapping on a funny voice and a walk. I think if you play it in truth, the comedy comes. You don't need to do too much gurning.
No, you're absolutely right. There are many different styles of dame, of course, and we've talked about that on the podcast before. I think you have to bring something of yourself to it, Paul, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the influences, who you've grown up with. I love Larry Grayson. I think he's brilliant. And that conversational type of dame, of not just whacking out a gag, but just having a nice chat with funny things. That's what I try to think my dame is like. We're just having a chat, me and the audience, and we're just having a bit of a laugh together, rather than here's a gag, here's a gag, here's a gag. And it's warming, and I think the audience are quite warmed to my type of dame. And in the Les Dawsons of this world and all that kind of stuff, it's who you're influenced by, and those older dames are certainly a great influence for me. I'm not really influenced by the drag side. I try to keep very much away from drag. I'm not trying to be a woman impersonator. I don't know if you agree. We are clowns. And I think that's what I very much stick to, rather than trying to be a female impersonator.
Absolutely, and that for me as well is reflected in the makeup. The makeup that I do is bright and colourful, but it's a clown's makeup. I'm not trying to be a woman or look like a woman. The interesting thing is, I was actually one of the last people to ever interview Larry Grayson. He hailed from down the road from us in Nuneaton, just over the border in Warwickshire, and he had a big sort of following all over the UK as well, but particularly here in Leicester, because in his formative years he performed in the working men's clubs here quite a lot. And I said to him, I can't believe you'd never played dame in panto, because he did panto quite a lot, but he never played dame, because his style was just perfect widow twanky, wasn't it? I was in the village the other day, and Everard, he's got a new bike now, he got rid of his old one, he's got a chopper now, but he couldn't cock his leg, his leg cocking days are over. And I'm thinking, this is dame banter, isn't it?
Oh gosh, yes, Slack Alice down the road and Peephole Pete. Yes.
I mean, obviously Les Dawson influenced a lot of people, but he was influenced himself by other dames previously. Nat Jackley, Billy Dainty was influenced by him. Everybody's influenced by somebody, aren't they? But Hugh Lloyd and people like that as well. I like John Inman, but I was never really influenced by him. I think his dame was slightly different, wasn't it?
Yeah, I wasn't influenced by him, but John Inman, I think, even in his I Being Served roles, he was him. His brand is what you saw, and I think that's what you got the whole time. That walk, the kooky walk, he came as a package, and he would be so hard to impersonate because everyone would go, "But that's John Inman." It's so different to playing a character. He was John Inman address, and people wanted John Inman. And I don't think you could replicate that, really.
I never saw him perform as dame, obviously a little bit before my time, but he influenced people like Les Dawson. Norman Evans, I think, is the perfect dame for me, in that sort of old school, gossipy, warm, everybody knows somebody either in the family or in the village who's like that, and that's the epitome of what I think a dame should be, or the sort of dame that I want to be anyway.
Yeah, certainly the over-the-wall chat.
I mentioned briefly that you have a sideline, call it a parallel career, whatever you want to describe it as. Just tell us what that is first of all, Paul, and then we'll find out how that started for you.
Well, when I'm not on stage in panto, I'm a funeral director. So I know I own my own company and everything. So yeah, it's. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a plan, but it's happened, and that's what I do all the time. Throughout the year now is looking after bereaved families.
Now, we've talked about your career. You've never not worked. You've always been touring or doing a show somewhere or panto. How on earth did you A, get into funeral directing, and B, find the time?
Well, I'm always tired. I try to do everything. But when I left drama school, you need to get a job. And I was a terrible waiter. I used to be a wine waiter, and I used to do a lot of the royal events. I used to work with Anton Mossman, who was, the Michelin-starred chef. So Prince Philip's 80th birthday party and private functions at St James's Palace, and I loved it because I love history. But I was a terrible waiter, my God, because I used to want to join in, and I can't bear rudeness, and people can be rude, and I'd go, "Excuse me, you didn't say thank you." That just wasn't kitted out for me. And my sister works in bereavement. She works in a mortuary. And she said, "Well, why don't you go and do bearing that's when you carry coffins?" And it's a job I could just pick up and put down, so to speak. And so that's what I did, and I could then just go off on tour, come back, and go and bear for people and go away again. And then I started working for a firm, and they said, "Oh, you're very good with people. Perhaps could you conduct funerals?" So that's what I started doing, and then I started arranging funerals. So it just sort of snowballed. And I think performers like us, we are pretty good with, you put us in a room and we can talk to anybody about anything for at least 3 minutes, and we can make people feel very comfortable, and I don't think you can teach those sorts of people skills. So I started arranging funerals. Again, I'd go off on tour and come back, and it got to a point where I was getting to an age, and I thought, I think the roles at some point are going to stop, because I can't play the Juve boys anymore, and I'm not old enough to look like the dad with 3 kids. I'm in that grey area where sometimes females go through in their 40s. They don't quite suit one or t'other role. And I did start thinking, I need to own a house, and acting isn't going to get me a house. So the boss that I worked for at the time said, "Look, if you stop touring and work for me full-time and run my company, I'll let you go to panto every year," which is what I did. Which was hard. It was a wrench, especially when the job offers were still coming in, and you had to start saying, "I'm so sorry." But, like my boss at the time said, acting, you can make a lot of money and be working all year, or you can make no money and only have 1 week's work. A salaried job, it's constant. And I still have what is my great enjoyment is knowing I've got panto to go to every year for 6 weeks or 7 weeks. So I can kind of tick every box. And from there I just thought, well, I'm quite good at this. I need to own my own business. So I started Morse Funeral Services, plug. I'll give you mates rates, Martin.
Oh, thank you.
2 years ago. So it's all been going very well. And I look after a lot of performers, a lot of actors when they pass away. So I can look after my own, which is quite nice, and have a proper theatrical funeral, which is slightly different to a regular funeral.
And in panto, in the meantime, you're back at Reading this year, but you've travelled around the country, and you did a lovely little theatre that I've been to a number of times in Chesterfield, the Pomegranate. You were there for 2 or 3 years, but you've been up to Halifax as well. So you've actually travelled the country performing, more so than I have. So I'm wondering whether or not you find audiences are different in different parts of the UK.
Yeah, they are. I think there is a very distinct difference between the north and the south. So I was in Halifax for 2 years, Crewe, and obviously Chesterfield is in the Midlands. The audiences I found there came wanting a party. They'd had a drink, it was a night out, you'd come on and they'd be quite raucous to start with, whereas I find the audiences down south just they take a little bit more time to warm up to you, and that you can't just take it for granted that you're going to get that great reception when you walk on. You have to sort of say to them, "Trust me, I'm not going to pick on you, I'm not going to make fun of you, but we can enjoy this together." And once you've got their trust, then they go for it. And Reading, obviously I've been at Reading now quite a while, so they do know me, so they know what's going to happen, and it's a lovely reception. But yeah, even in the plays, I would find that when you come on in a comedy, they would always just sit back in the south a bit more to go, "Okay, what's this all about? Okay, we can join in," whereas the north come with, "Right, where do we start? We're all in it together."
We've talked on previous podcasts to other dames about the importance of the rapport and the relationship and the chemistry between you and the comic. In fact, you've got a great cast again this year. A couple of people that I've worked with a couple of times myself, Sarah Acamando and Carl Frashek, who are a joy to work with. But Justin Fletcher and yourself, that's integral to the success of that panto, that relationship between the two of you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've become a real double team. It's so nice when you work with a comic that you get on well, you understand each other's humour. We like the same sort of comedy, and it's got to the point now after, I think we've been together 6 years, we don't really have to say too much on stage. We can just communicate by the look, and we are in sync, and we know when one's going to do this or one's not. So it's really nice. It just flows, and that helps the audience because it's not jarring, and they feel safe when we're both on together because they know it's just going to work. And over the years, I have been put with comics, and you don't quite work for whatever reason. It just doesn't quite work, and it can feel a bit grating. And I think the audience can pick up on that. They won't know why it's not working, but they'll go, well, something's jarring. So I'm very lucky with Justin that we both do get on very well, and the audiences enjoy us as a double act, which is nice.
Yeah, and I bet you can't wait to get back out there again this Christmas, because it was so strange last year, and it's like, putting on a pair of comfy slippers again, isn't it? You're in an environment you're used to, with people that you've worked with before, with an audience who are desperate to see shows again.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we're all just chomping at the bit to do it, and I think this year, we're all going to see the audiences really going for it, because they're going to be so grateful to be in a theatre again as well, watching live theatre. And like you probably get the same as me, people saying, you are our Christmas, you are our tradition. We know Christmas starts when we come to see you in panto on the 15th of December. We come every year. That's their starting gun for Christmas time. So for them to have that tradition taken away must have thrown the audience as well as us. I mean, I did sit at home in December going, shouldn't I be somewhere doing something,
Yeah, me too. And I've probably said this before, but my son is 25 and he's never known Christmas without me doing panto. And the irony was last Christmas that I didn't have one because the Leicester de Montfort Hall one was postponed, but he managed as an actor now to get one in the open air in Shropshire. And I went to see him, which was just an incredible turnaround, to be honest. We got 3 final questions to ask Paul, which I've asked every guest on the podcast series so far. The first is a straightforward, what is your favourite panto title?
I think, it's 2 for me. It's Cinderella or Aladdin. Cinderella because it's so magical, and that transformation scene at the end of Act 1, obviously as dames, as uglies, we're never in it, and when we did it in Reading in 2019, we had female ugly sisters, or their wicked stepsisters, so I was played the nanny role, so that was a new role created. So even then I wasn't in the transformation, but I always stood at the wings. I always stand and watch the transformation in the wings, and that flying Pegasus goes off, and you just hear the audience, the gasps of the children, the clapping of the audience, and then you can see them wiping tears away because it's just so magical. And even now it makes the hairs on my arms really go up, and you think that's the power of live theatre. That magic is just, you just couldn't bottle it, And Aladdin, I love Aladdin because it's so traditional, and Widow Twankey is, I think, probably the greatest dame that there is, and it's Aladdin is a great show. So they're my 2 favourites.
The interesting thing with Cinderella is that that end of Act 1, Coach and Horses taking off, it sort of builds, doesn't it? Because the audience see it starting to take off and think, wow, this is amazing. Then, of course, it turns in midair, and that takes it to another level as well. You have played ugly before, haven't you? How do you find that compared to being a dame?
I've played ugly 7 times. And it is nice to be wicked. I must admit, it is nice to get a boo. I really enjoy it. But it's very different to dame because, uglies talk at an audience, whereas dames speak to an audience. It's so different. You have just a different dialogue. So I do much prefer being a single dame. And I think especially now being Reading, I think one of the reasons of not having me as an ugly sister in Reading was because I don't think the audience would have accepted me as an ugly, because they've seen me be a cuddly nanny all these years, and working with Justin, I'd have had to start being mean to Justin and mean to the audience, and I don't think that would have sat very well with them. And I don't like sharing the limelight, to be honest.
Well, I was going to say the dynamic is completely different, isn't it? Because your dame, I know, because I've spoken to people who've worked with you and seen you, is so warm, and that is evident in your relationship with the audience. Of course, the uglies are not, but also the dynamic is different because, unless you are a double act who work as ugly sisters every year, you're thrown into another relationship with somebody you haven't worked with before.
Yeah, and that can be very hard, especially if that other person hasn't played ugly before, or they're new to it, because sometimes they will put a newer person with an older person to teach them the ropes. And if they don't understand the rules, really, and not everyone could be funny. The ugliest, it really has to be the straight person and the funnier one. You can't both be funny. You can't both be spiky, because it's too much for an audience. And if people don't understand that, again, it's like what I was speaking about earlier, it will grate and there'll be that clash and it won't work. And the audience will go, I don't know why this isn't working, but it's just not sitting well for me. And people have to understand that uglies have to be comic book ugly. They can't be seen as bullies. It's a very thin line. And if they do come across as bullying Cinderella, you're finished, because the audience won't enjoy you, and the children will go, that rings a bit too true and I don't like it, and you've lost them.
My favourite question that I've asked everybody is, audiences love it, don't they, when things go wrong? But when was it not all right on the night for you, Paul?
Well, I've got two stories I can tell you.
Oh, good.
One, I was in Chesterfield, and we were just on stage, and then all the power went, gone. Music's like, it was just nothing. So I had to then go off, come on with a torch, and do the so sorry, anyone got a penny for the meter type stuff. And it turns out in the end, the MD was cold in the pit, so he unplugged everything and plugged in his own heater. Wiped the show up, the board, everything went down. So we were off for about 25 minutes, all because he was too cold in the pit. So I gave him stick for that for the rest of the run.
I hope you did.
And then in Reading, we were Jack and the Beanstalk, and Ken Morley from Coronation Street, Reg Holsworth, was with us, who's brilliant. He's great, and he's been in panto for 410 years. And I was with John Clegg, was the comic with me. And we just finished the scene, and King Crumble should be coming on. And we said, the king should be coming. No king. I said, well, I'm sure the king will be here any moment. Nothing. Zero. We're looking out the barn door thinking, oh no. Then we suddenly heard, oh! And then patter of feet. And he'd fallen asleep in his dressing room. And eventually appeared, crown kind of like a beret, and sorry, oh no, sorry. I said, and obviously at least the line, did you forget something, King Crumble? Like a watch? Which the audience thoroughly enjoyed.
John Clegg is another great panto comic to work with as well. Such incredible impressions. The final question is a straightforward one as well, Paul. Why is panto so special for you?
Panto is special for me because it now means Christmas. I've been doing it for so long, I don't, apart from last year, really know what it's like not to be in panto at Christmas. So it's just festive, it's magical. I love that you look out into that audience and there's whole families that you see year after year, and they grow, and there's a little one, the mums and dads, and then there's your grannies and granddads, but all enjoying it on their different levels, but all thoroughly enjoying it. And I think what we're really lacking is good family entertainment that all the family can sit and watch. And I think that's lacking on television, and that's why I think it works. And that's what I love providing. I love hearing people laugh, and I love hearing that I'm part of people's tradition and Christmas. It's a really lovely feeling.
I totally agree with you. I think the audiences are in for a real treat again this year at the Hexagon in Reading. We've mentioned the stellar lineup that you've got there as well, Paul. I hope it goes really well for you and you have a great time. It's been a long time coming, so enjoy every minute of it. And thank you so much for talking to us today.
Lovely. Thank you for having me, Martin.
Thank you, Paul. And that's about it for this episode. As I said at the very beginning, there are many more fabulous guests still to come, so please subscribe through your favourite podcast app, and make sure you join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 18, when I'll be joined by the singer, actor, dancer and choreographer Jenny Phillips. I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.